This is the Proteus Builder, and today I'm going to show you how to turn this into your perfect controller. We're going to use Marvel Rivals as an example, and we're going to remap this controller to work perfectly for that game. But of course, this tutorial can be used for any game that you're playing. Now let's jump into it. So here I've just searched best keyboard and mouse settings. These are the most important inputs, so I need to make sure I have WASD, I have space, left control, and left click and right click is already on my mouse. I'm actually not going to edit my mouse. Secondary weapon. Something you can do if you want to limit the buttons that are on your controller is add more buttons to your mouse. A lot of gaming mice have extra buttons or a scroll wheel. Next weapon is scroll up and scroll down, so we might keep it like that. You need your reload and all of your abilities and your ultimate abilities. Now this menu is actually missing a couple of inputs, for example changing your hero. I'll show you that when we get into the game, but one thing that's interesting when you go from a controller setting to a keyboard setting is that the games just add more inputs, but on a controller usually they just use buttons more than once, or they have a hold or something like that. With a keyboard, obviously the game expects you to have all of the keyboard buttons, but we have 8 primary buttons and 8 secondary buttons. So we're a little bit more limited on our inputs, but that's because we want most of it just easy access in one hand. And I will show you what we will do for our secondary layer, which is where you might run out of space with just this layer here. For any buttons that you're missing here, for example changing hero or emotes or anything like that, you can put that on the secondary layer, and we'll get into that later when we get into the game. So let's first start by mapping all of these inputs. So I've already loaded my controller here. Here's my builder controller. If you want to know how to connect the software, watch our software tutorial. This is just really quickly going to run through how to map the buttons. So first off, I'm already in HID. So make sure you're in HID mode. This tutorial will show you how to do HID mode, which is recommended for Marvel Rivals on PC if you want to use the mouse. Now let's start with our analog input. So we have a left analog cube, and we want that to be WASD. You saw right there that I actually couldn't change the analog stick mapping until I moved it. That's because you need to actually move the input to remap it. The reason for that is it's a modular controller. You could have multiple left analog cubes connected, so we need you to just move the analog stick you actually want to use. We know which one you want to remap. So I'm going to update this to WASD. It's successfully updated, and now we've ticked off WASD. So jump, ascend and descend. I like to put these, again, this is all personal preference. I like to put these kind of here. That way I can kind of move up and down when I'm using flying characters, or jump really easily. You want to think of your movement as probably one of the most important aspects of your game. You want to be able to move around easily. So I press the button I want to be descend, which happens to be A. And I look at my menu, left control, so I just type that in. And now that's left control. My button I want to be ascend. I look over here, which one's ascend, space, and make that space. Okay, so then we go, what's our next most important thing? Primary attack and secondary attack I actually already have on my mouse, so I'm not going to remap that. So primary and secondary attack I already have on my mouse. We can move on to the next one. Primary and secondary weapon. These ones I think I'll use a little bit less, so I might put them on my second layer. So let's map which button I want to use to actually move to my second layer. I like to use the analog stick just because it's always there. My fingers are kind of moving around on other buttons, so if I want to be holding down something, I prefer to use this button on the analog stick, so L3. So let me just press L3, and I'm going to put that to my function switch to change to my other layer. So now that we have a function switch button mapped, I can go into our function switch layer and then map my secondary buttons. So one of the things that's like a little bit tricky going from a keyboard where you can see what all the buttons are to a controller like this where it's a little bit more difficult. You do have what the buttons are, but you're not actually looking at that most of the time. So you want to kind of just visualize in your head, or this is what I do anyway, what makes sense to be 1. And to me, what makes sense to be 1 is the one that where my index finger is just resting. So I'm just going to put the A button down here as 1. Again, it kind of just makes sense to you. What do you think you'll remember to be 1? And again, it will take like a little bit of time to get used to where all the buttons are. But rather than thinking about it as a keyboard, just think about what makes sense to be my first weapon and my secondary weapon, or what makes sense to be up and down, things like that. So I've mapped my A and my X to be my primary and secondary weapon. When I hold down my L3 button and press those, it's going to switch between keyboard 1 and keyboard 2. So for these, again, it's on my mouse, so I'm just going to skip. So these are our next buttons we have. We have our reload and all of our abilities. So it's kind of up to you. It makes sense to me that my abilities would be sort of in one area, so all over here, and that anything else might be over here. So I'm going to put my abilities on my D-pad section, and I'm going to put my reload down here. Again, it just kind of makes sense to me. So make sure you switch back from function switch back to your HID normal. You can tell the difference, the colors are a little bit different. So I'm going to press the button I feel like should be my first ability. And that is E. Press the button I feel like should be my second ability, which is G. My third ability, which is F. And then my ultimate, which is Q. We're making sure we're in HID normal. I'm going to press the button I feel like should be reload and put it to OR. And so we have one more button left that we haven't mapped. And we have one more main button here, which is L shift. So I'm just going to put that to L shift. And again, it kind of depends on your playstyle. If you're not, it's left shift. If you're not punching things a lot, then maybe you prefer that to be a different button. You might notice if you've played this game, there's actually a few buttons missing. For example, change hero is H. So it kind of depends how you prefer. So for any buttons that are missing, I'm going to put them on my function switch layer. So I'm just going to put H there. And then when I'm playing the game, if I notice that like I'm missing buttons like emoting or something, I put them on my function switch layer. So generally you have more than enough buttons to play with. It just depends how you want to set it up. So now that our controller is mapped, we have our WASD, all of our primary and our secondary buttons. I'm going to go into the game and test it out. What I recommend is going into the practice range for whatever game you're in. If it's just an RPG or a chill game, maybe the game kind of just has that already. So I have to remember which button is my space, which is this one. I like to play Iron Man. So now I have up, I have down, I have flying, which is my L shift. Okay, so I can see that down there, my L shift. My reload is here, but I haven't actually done anything, so it's my reload. This is my ability 1. My other ability, and my ultimate I don't have charged. And I think this character doesn't have another ability. So yeah, basically this is what I recommend. Just like go into the game and make sure that everything's where it needs to be. There's no issue with running the software in the background while you go into the game. Whether you're using the web app or the downloadable version, it's the same. The game doesn't interact with the software at all. I just like to keep it open so I can move back and forth, but it's totally up to you. But from the game's perspective, there's no issue with keeping the software open. So you can see in the top right hand corner, I actually have some buttons that I didn't have mapped, such as B and hero profile. So if I would just go back, put them on my function switch layer and add them in. So that's exactly why it's important to go into your training and make sure that you have all your buttons. Or if you're starting a new game, usually there's a tutorial and it will tell you which buttons you need and you can kind of map them as you go. So while sometimes it's not quite a plug and play experience, there is a level of customization you need. But once you've customized your controller, you have the perfect setup that's made for you.